Hello, folks, and welcome back to the Culture Books podcast. This is Season 3, Episode 29. We are recording on the 9th of June, 2025. My name is John, and I'm joined by...
Sheridan.
Sheridan is with us for the end of this epic journey that has taken us multiple years. But here we are. So if this is your first time listening to the Culture Books podcast, this is the wrong episode. You should at least go back to episode 1 of season 3 or all the way back to season 1, episode 1. But we will be recapping the indie bits of use of weapons. It's a bit like The Lord of the Rings and the movie version that just keeps going and going and going, doesn't it? You think you've had an ending and yet here we are. But we're going to get through the 3 parts of the end here. Sheridan, what do we do at this part of the show?
You have 30 seconds to recap the book thus far, which I guess will be kind of challenging.
This is going to be kind of challenging. Do you want to count me in?
3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so we've had 2 timelines, one going forward, one going backwards, studying the life of who we think is Sharadin Zakawi, but it turns out is mostly his cousin Elethiamel. We have explored into his past where he does a truly atrocious thing that then haunts him through the rest of his future. And then we see him through to revisiting his past as he appears to be on the edge of death. And we will discuss further whether or not that is indeed his death. And that's my time.
It's pretty good.
Thank you. Oof. Okay, Sheridan, you have possibly even a more challenging task in terms of summarising 3 very disparate bits of writing. Your time starts in 3, 2, 1.
So we have an epilogue, which is 2 people setting off a bomb. That's probably it. There's a poem. I don't really like poems, so, there's that. Then there's prologue, which is Smar recruiting what one can assume is can only be the next Zakawi.
Yep. All right, and you're done with 8 seconds to spare. We will get to the poem. We won't dwell too long on it. Did you notice who wrote it?
Ooh.
Don't look now. All right, so you didn't. Okay, we'll discuss that. Okay, let me just bring up my text. And so it starts the epilogue, and I'll just read the opening paragraph because it's typical of this book, where the hell am I moment for the reader. Dust, as usual, followed them. Though the young man said several times he thought it might rain, the old man disagreed and said the clouds over the mountains were deceptive. There's a certain Waiting for Godot character about this, the Cullis Zakawi interaction. And this is the second time we've met these two as a pair. Because it was,
when was the first
It
time?
was literally the opening of the book. When they're in the palace getting drunk. And
Yeah,
and this is kind of a recapitulation from a second point of view because it starts just before and ends just afterwards.
Right.
That scene. Now, I know we have listeners who have been in touch and they are firmly of the view that the fact the young man / Zakawi has a shaved head
yes, I was going to ask about this.
indicates this is placed after the events of the last chapter. I would say that is a possibility. I think Banks is being deliberately extremely vague as to Zakawi's fate. And I think Zakawi is capable of cutting his hair in his life and growing it back again. And I also feel like this might be the planet where Zakawi led the Chosen One out of the desert. Because we have a nomadic people conquering this place, although that could be the same planet, but 40 years later when Zakawi came back. I don't know. I don't feel that the reader is given enough information to know anything. I think this is meant to be vague.
I felt like it was meant to be vague.
Yeah. Have you got any general thoughts on this epilogue, or should we just move through the highlights?
So would it be Zakawi though, or
It's definitely Zakawi as the young man.
So it's not Elethiamel as...
Oh, sorry, it's Zakawi / Elethiamel, the character we've known as Zakawi throughout the whole
right,
book.
Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely him. Although I don't think he's named in this chapter, but he was named...
He's not named in the chapter,
He was named in the chapter that introduced these as a pair.
Yes.
Yeah, and talked about having a chunk of a princess's bone in his heart and all that sort of thing. Yeah. So, just going to do another paragraph here. They chose the Royal Park as the best place to plant the bomb because the troops could be comfortably accommodated in the park's wide spaces, and the High Command would likely take to the grand pavilions. The old man thought they'd want to occupy the palace, but the young man was convinced that in their hearts the invaders were desert people and would prefer the spaces of the park to the clutter of the citadel. And, I mean, this bomb is obviously a nuclear weapon. It's not just any old bomb.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they only have one nuclear weapon, they say.
Oh, to get to mention, yeah, that's right. Yes, I've got this line here. About the only thing they agreed on was that what they were doing was a waste of the one nuke their side, indeed either side, possessed. Because even if they had guessed correctly and the invaders behaved as they had anticipated, the most they could hope to do was wipe out one army. And that would still leave 3 more, any one of which could probably complete the invasion. So the warhead, like the lives, would be wasted. I mean, it's a bit like the last days of the Third Reich, where, you know, if Germany could defeat one Russian army, it just meant there were 5 more. I'll just read on. Stop me if there's any bit you want to talk about. Then I'm jumping ahead a little bit. The older man was called Cullis, so that does place it's definitely the Cullis-Succowy double act being revisited. And he won the argument about where they ought to wait, so they settled into their high grand citadel and found lots of weapons and wine and got drunk and talked and told jokes and swapped outrageous stories of daring do and conquest. And at one point, one of them asked the other what happiness was and received a fairly flippant reply, but later neither could remember which one had asked and which one had answered. So that's all the goings-on of the opening chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And then I do like this. They slept and they woke and they got drunk again and they told more jokes and lies. And a light shower of rain blew softly over the city at one point. And sometimes the young man would move his hand over his shaved head through long, thick hair that was not there anymore. So it's the line that gets people very excited that this is immediately after the previous chapter. Like I said, I don't have that certainty, but if that theory works for you, then that's grand. Then still they waited, and when the first shells started to fall, they found they'd picked the wrong place to wait, and so went scrambling out of it and down the steps and into the courtyard and into the half-track, and then away out into the desert and the wasteland beyond, where they camped at dusk and got drunk again and stayed up specially that night to watch the flash. So what did you take from that as an epilogue to the story?
I must say I found the prologue a little bit more interesting.
By the prologue, you mean the next little bit of the book that comes after this?
Yeah, like I don't know. I didn't really feel like it added anything. What did you think?
In terms of the structure of the book being a series of vignettes about Succowy soldiering, it gave a sense of the life, and sitting with a big pile of booze with a friend to watch a bomb go off. Admittedly, when you're going to kill tens of thousands of people needlessly, if you're a soldier, I guess it's still a win. You take the win. You ignore you're trained to ignore the moral consequences of your actions, which I think is going to tie into some of the other things I've got to say about Succowy / Ella-Théomel. So in that sense, it does. It's not even a highlight. It's like the reverse of a highlight, but it casts a glow over the whole story. But I think let's save Ella-Théomel's moral compass until we get through the written words, I think. So
okay.
We'll move on. Then we get to Succowy's song. And you didn't notice who wrote it, but it's the final line of this poem is what makes it. It's which is often the way with a really good poem. It can be quite, where's this going? And then you get to a twist in the final line and you're like, aha, now I get it. Which is simply the bomb lives only as it is falling, which is a beautiful summary of Succowy / Ella-Théomel's life. He was always at a loose end when he wasn't fighting.
Yeah.
But when he was plummeting out of the sky to wreck some stuff, he was truly alive.
That's true.
Now, the author of this poem, in universe context, is Shias Engin, which was his girlfriend, the poet. So
right.
she's finally written a poem for him.
Yeah.
And then the real kicker is if you go through the notes on where this poem is found, Volume 9, Juvenilia and Discarded Drafts. So she wrote it, but she didn't do much with it.
She didn't want to do anything with it.
Yeah. Anyway, so often with Banks, if he puts these little notes in there, there's something in there you're meant to find, and you do there. Now we get to your copy called this a prologue. Mine just calls it States of War.
Well, mine calls it...
Sorry, States of War and then prologue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I think it's kind of fitting, given the timeline of this book, that we finish with a prologue.
Yeah, well, I thought I was getting I thought I was being given the chapter for the next book.
The next book, yeah. A lot of people do. So if
but then you realise you're not, because the books don't really have the same characters.
Well, at this point, it's only the third book in the Culture series, so it's not as established that characters don't return.
True, but you've told me they don't really, so...
Yeah, you know that now. So, damn it, I've ruined things with spoilers. Feel free to send angry comments through, folks. So, as I was saying, I think it's kind of cute that we're ending a book with the prologue, because the timeline of the book's been so all over the place. Similarly, the epilogue would normally have been the end of the action, and I can see people saying this is something that happened after the Alethea Mel reveal chapter, but given the structure of the book, that's not as guaranteed as it would be in
Well,
any
she
other
could
text.
be recruiting people concurrently with Zakawe.
Well, I mean, this moment is definitely, because this is the ruins of just the aftermath of the last battle Zakawe fights.
How do you know that, though?
Because it mentions the battle and the empires involved, and they're all by name. So this guy was fighting in Zakawe's army, and lost his legs when the citadel was taken.
Okay.
So he was one of Zakawe's soldiers. I'm not going to start with the opening paragraph. I like the second paragraph a bit more. He lifted the basket out of his lap and balanced it on the retaining wall, took the cutters from his jacket pocket and looked carefully at the selection of small plants, trying to gauge which cuttings had fared best since their planting. He hadn't chosen the first one when some movement upslope attracted his attention. And then we get a classic Dizier reveal. And then she comes over and says, "How are you, Mr. Escoera?" How did they pronounce that in the book, in the audiobook?
I think it was Escoria.
Escoria. Okay, let's go with that.
I might be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They give him a sort of Russian accent.
That's interesting, because I read that name as more Hispanic. But,
Yeah.
I mean, that's fine. We can go with whatever. So, how are you, Mr. Escoera? Are you well? He looked down at what was left of his legs, amputated above the knees. "What is left of me is well, ma'am." It had become his usual reply. He knew it might sound bitter to some people, but really it was his way of showing he did not want to pretend that there was nothing wrong with him. She looked at the trousered stumps with a frankness he had only known before from children. It was a tank, wasn't it? So, yay, tanks mentioned. For those who don't know, I have a podcast about tanks as well. Totally Tanked. You can look it up if you're interested. And then the dialogue between them goes on. Dizier saying, "Story I heard, you were dragging one of your comrades out of its..." "Yes," he interrupted. "Yes, that's the story. Of course, I didn't know then the price of charity is developing extremely strong arm muscles." Which
It was
I
a
thought
good
very
line,
funny.
yeah.
It's a very similar joke to Scaffin giving Zakawe a hat when he's lost his body.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they're talking about his medals. And then he gets angry. "Yeah, lady," he sneered. "I said the wrong things. My family were never very well connected, even when they were alive. And now they're not even that, thanks to the Imperial Glycine Air Force. And these..." He clutched the chest of his tunic, hauling at the ribbon medals, brandishing them. "These I'd trade you, all of them, for a pair of shoes I could wear. Now," he leant forward at her, took up the clippers, "I have work to do. There's a guy down in the Institute who stepped on a mine. He hasn't got any legs at all, and he lost an arm. Maybe you'd find it even more fun to go and patronise him. Excuse me." So, I mean, basically this guy seems all sorts of awesome, doesn't he?
Yeah. I don't think she was that mean to him, though. But, I mean, he must be sus on her, because she just turns up, knows his name, doesn't say who she is.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously he doesn't. He's got a lot of bitterness about the way the war ended for him.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's, in a way, given that he was on the losing side, he's quite lucky that he's been looked after at all. But that's not a huge comfort to you when you're in that situation. And then it finishes. He sighed. "What exactly do you want, lady?" "You, Mr. Escuera." The woman smiled her beautiful smile. She looked at the stumps. "By the way, the deal with the medals and the shoes, fair enough," she shrugged. "See if you can keep the medals." She reached into the basket, took out the clippers and stuck them into the earth under the plants, then put her hands clasped on the front of the seat. "Now, Mr. Escuera," Smar said, shivering, "how would you like a proper job?" So, I actually thought this cast Smar and Contact in a quite sinister light.
Oh yeah, they're basically like trying to
Where's some more meat to farm out?
like where someone's so desperate to like get their life back that they'll do anything.
Yeah, and we can put them through the hell that is, in Zakawa's life with the culture. Yes, he had a lot of fun, but he suffered a lot as well.
Yeah.
Truly horrible things happened to him, and this guy's been signed up to go through similar. Any other takeaways for you from that tiny snippet?
Well, just that they're just going to keep doing what they do.
And finding more meat to fill the role.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, big picture, whole book as a whole, now you've got to the end. What'd you think?
Well, I still don't like the culture.
Okay.
I think that they are nasty.
Okay.
I've always been sus on them.
Right. You think all of the culture is nasty, or it has nasty elements, or?
Well, like a thing is only the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
So
billions of people living beautiful, enriched, happy lives with zero environmental damage, fully
they're murdering people.
Which people are we talking about now?
Well, they're hiring mercenaries to go out and...
Yeah, only because they're trying to stop people murdering each other.
I don't know. They seem sus.
I mean,
I don't like them.
It's a trolley car dilemma. The culture's willing to flip the switch. Are you going to just let it careen down and murder the larger group of people?
They take advantage of people, though.
Yeah.
They take advantage of people's vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
And that's, like, not ethical.
True, but, an agent could at any point leave Contact and just become a culture citizen. They choose to stay.
But the whole society's complicit in it.
All societies are complicit in bad things that are done on its behalf, though.
True.
And, yeah. For me, and this book is often said to have a young man problem, and when I was 25 and reading it, I was definitely one of the young men who was a problem. Because I found it somewhat admirable the lengths LFML was willing to go to win.
He's an awful person, though.
I know he's an awful person, but this is part of the critique of how young men view this book. I think reading it now as an older man who's been around the blocks a few times, it spoke to me more about the foolishness of LFML. I mean, for a start, he did a terrible thing that blackened his name for all eternity and killed his sister, and he still lost. So what was the point of that dude? But we have our society is run by people who think whatever it takes is a valid philosophy. They're terribly wrong, and I actually have come to believe, but I didn't believe it when I was 25, that the by far greater courage is to be willing to lose and to suffer the consequences of losing rather than abandon your essential morals.
Yes.
It would have been braver and better for LFML to surrender to his cousin.
Not kill his sister.
And not kill his sister. And not kill all the soldiers who died in the fighting.
Yeah.
Given that he was going to lose anyway.
Yeah.
But learning how to lose is something I think that does come with growing older. And of course, the winners of this world will say, well, that's just what you losers think. And then they view us as weak and puny for it. But I mean, they sleep extremely well, so I can't even say I sleep better. But I sleep better than I would have if I had chosen darker paths, I guess. So that's just me. Okay, anything else you want to talk about in the book, Sheridan?
No. I mean,
Okay.
I felt like I found it was an interesting narrative structure, but probably would have been better if I'd read it faster.
Yes, it would have helped if we hadn't taken
2 years.
to do it. The funny thing is, almost everyone who listens to this series is going to listen to it after we've released the last episode, and for them there's no gap in time
True.
from episode to episode. But I do want to offer an enormous amount of appreciation to there's a couple of hundred people who are listening to every episode as they drop new, and they've all waited on tenterhooks for the next episode each time. So
I mean, the twists were really good.
yeah, widely thought of as some of the best twists
Yeah.
in fiction. Yeah,
Yeah.
And more than one, and you think you're done
Yeah,
with the twists.
that's-
Yeah. And now the big question, Sheridan, are you up for keeping on going?
I am.
Okay. So next we're going to do 2 stories from the short story compilation State of the Art, but we're only going to do the culture related ones. So there's one of them that's called A Gift from the Culture.
What are all the other ones?
They're just other stories. You can read them if you want, but they're not culture stories, so we're not going to...
So in my book,
yeah,
it has a little excerpt for the algebraist.
that's not a culture book.
Okay, this is so just an Ian M. Baggs book.
Yeah. It's a very good book. I quite like The Algebraist.
What about Look to the Windward?
Look to Windward is much later.
Right. Inversions is another one.
Yeah, I'm not even sure we're going to do inversions.
Accession is another one.
Accession is what I view as probably the next one we're going to do. But
God,
firstly,
there's heaps of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Fearsome Engine.
Fearsome Engine isn't culture.
Have you read all these books?
Yeah,
Against a Dark Background.
not culture.
Okay, let's see this one.
Okay, but let's. Well, there's a dog throwing up in the corner
God. Okay, so what's the next book?
there. So the next book is called State of the Art, which is a short story collection.
How many stories are in there?
10 or so. But we're only going to do 2
Why?
because there's only 2 that are culture stories.
What are the others?
Just other stories. Like I said, you can read them in your own time, but I don't want them slowing you down from the mission, okay?
I was going to say, you probably don't want to distract me.
That's what I'm saying. So there's A Gift from the Culture is going to be our next episode.
Okay.
And then the novella, which is much longer, is called State of the Art.
How long is that? God, I could be going forever on that.
We'll find out. It'll drop when it drops. And then for folks wanting to get further ahead, the next culture book we're going to do is Accession. And it's worth noting that after writing Use of Weapons and State of the Art, Ian Banks took, I think, something like a 10-year holiday from the culture, and then
Wow.
and then came back with Accession.
Oh, so there's a massive break now.
There was a break in his writing for culture books, yeah.
Yeah, right. So that's a huge leap technology-wise in his world.
Yes.
And because, I mean, he's pretty good with the technology, really. Like but, you know, there's been some times when you're like, oh, that's not actually how that would go.
Look, when we get to Accession, you will see that email has definitely arrived in his life.
Email.
Yes, I think, and this is just a straight guess. It's by no means canonical or researched or anything. Basically, having written the first 3 culture books and a couple of culture stories in State of the Art, they then built a following after that.
Yeah, right.
And then it was some years later where his publishers were like, the public really wants another culture book. And we, the publishers, really want to sell another culture
Yeah,
book.
right.
So that's I'm pretty sure what was going on.
And so how many
there.
more are there?
I think there's 10 in total.
Right, okay.
Depends if you count inversions or not.
Why is inversions not one?
It was marketed as a culture book, but the culture is extremely peripheral to the story,
Right.
and in fact might not even be there. But we'll make a decision on that once we get to the end of Accession, which is a long way in the future.
Okay,
So,
all right.
cool. All right. Well, Sheridan, thank you so much for sticking with us. An even bigger thank you to our audience who have stuck with us through this
It's a
process.
shizzle.
And we will try not to keep you waiting too long for a gift from the culture. You know, it's going to be a very short season 4, 2 episodes.
Yes.
Woohoo! Might even get it done this year. Woo! All right, folks, we will be back in your ears, we hope, in the not too distant future.